Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the DCI number 840 US3. This is a single automatic flush bolt, is what this is. Probably going to be at the top is where I would end up. Well, actually not necessarily. At the bottom as well. It's a single bolt. You can use it in either instance. You can use this would be half of a fully automatic set. This would be half of a semi-automatic set, but this is an automatic flush bolt in itself because every time that the active door closes, it will depress this trigger, forcing that spring-loaded assembly to move. And it does have a clutch assembly on it. You can see that how that will move when I restrict that movement and then I push on the trigger. The clutch assembly will kick in. And the concept of automatic flush bolts is, with the inclusion of other material required, you can have a pair of doors that are compliant with fire rating requirements without any trouble. You know, you don't have to have latching. You don't have to have hardware on both doors that can activate the door like an exit device and latch the door simultaneously, because you may not need an exit device at all, but the doors are fire rated. You may not need an exit device because your occupancy is below 50 or 100, depending on what code reference is being called into play. Or you might need an exit device on the active door only, okay, based on code and your clear opening, but not both doors. Well, a coordinator and automatic flush bolts would be compliant with that, or at least would be the grounds to be compliant with that. So that's really where you'll see this. The other time you're going to see this is just out of convenience, in the sense, and while you don't see it often for convenience, there is no trigger, no flip, no manual lock and unlock with this. So the convenience part comes in. If you have a pair of doors, just close the inactive first, and they're not fire rated, and then close the active, and now both doors are latched. You don't have to close and then reach up and reach down, etc. Another reason this might be an easier gizmo to use is because you might have unusually tall doors, and you may not want to be able to reach up so high, and you may not want to have a, let's say you had 9-foot doors, you didn't want a 3-foot long top rod. You do occasionally see that, but it's not very common. But the application this is going to be used in is pair of fire-rated doors. The inactive must be self-latching and cannot be a manual flush bolt. Now, you can have manual flush bolts in a very specific application. Pair of doors that are fire-rated. The application is a mechanical closet, or some application where there is no human, permanent human occupancy within that space. An electrical closet, no one's going to be living in there. So some sort of application like that, maybe access to storage, can have a closer on one door and manual flush bolts on the other, and still be fire rated. The logic is, think of a hotel would be good, but think of a hospital, a communications closet, an MEP closet, something with building mechanicals, electrical in it. The logic is both doors are going to be opened. Someone is always going to be at the opening, and you would never leave that opening unsecure. You would not leave that opening to go do something else and leave the doors ajar because it's access to mechanical equipment or dangerous electrical equipment. So the logic is inactive door, manual flush bolts, no closer, active door closer and latch or lock, some sort of latch, and fire rated. That's okay. But that's the only area that you're going to see that as permissible. When you need to go to fire rated, both doors must be latching. If occupancy requires exits on both doors, that's obvious. If occupancy doesn't require it on both doors, and that is calculated by the clear opening, there's a formula that says how many people, what's the maximum occupancy, and there is a formula that number is plugged into, multiplied by your clear opening will give you a value. And if that value is within range of occupancy and the clear opening, then there you go. and that's how that's determined. So, and in that instance, when you have a pair of fire-rated doors and you only need one exit device, there could be nothing on the other door. No dummy trim, literally nothing that represents a handle. So you would put nothing on that door at all. All the way down to, you don't require an exit device, but the doors still need to be fire-rated, which means you'll need a door coordinator, which basically says you have a pair of doors. One door's got the locking, latching hardware. The other door has the automatic or semi-automatic flush bolts. The coordinator basically tells the active door, hold until the inactive closes, and then the active door is permitted to close. And that's how the entire arrangement is compliant and safe and correct. And this is one component, potentially, of that exact system. So that's where this 840 comes in. Why the client's buying one, maybe the application only requires one. Maybe they'd have to replace one. Whatever the case is. I don't know why they are ordering only one. You would generally have a pair of bolts, either automatic or semi-automatic. And semi-automatic basically just means the bottom will be self-latching, but the top, the bottom will be automatic. The top will be semi-automatic, where it has a latch rather than a bolt, so that when that door is closed, the T-strike in the header will allow that latch to retract and close that, to retract that entire assembly. There'd be a push button here. It wouldn't be a trigger, it would be a recessed button about the size of a quarter that you push in, retract the bolt down, and now you're active. The advantage of that is active doors opened, bottom is always latched or bolted. You push the button in on the top, and let me back up. When you open the active door, the bottom is already unlatched because you've opened the active door. Now all you got to do is push that button. Now the inactive will open. Okay, so this is shown in the 605 finish. They're calling it US3, probably because there are parts here that are not brass, which would make sense. The faceplate is made of solid brass. Very, very, very nice finish on that faceplate. Has your UL stamp, and that letter F, if you were to look at the letter F on items, you'll see a lowercase f and an uppercase f. Fun fact, lowercase is neutral pressure, capital F is positive pressure. There is a strike here for the header. That is made of brass. Or the sill. Oh, let's back up. Dimensional properties. 6 3/4 by 1. That's going to be the very typical and common size. Our deadbolt, our strike should be 2 1/4 by 15/16, maybe? 2 1/4. Yeah, okay, just going from memory. 15/16. Then you're going to have your scar plate or your strike plate. You know what? This material may be stainless. This has got to be. This can't be brass. You're not going to be able to have brass and have it fire rated. So I'm betting that these are. It's clearly not steel, but it is not. This is not stainless, because it may be zinc. Anyway, it's regardless of what the base material it is clearly compliant with the UL listing requirements of both. Now, what is this for? Although, what this is the strike plate or the scar plate. This is going to be installed on the active door, so that every time the door comes to close, the scar plate will hit that trigger, okay, and allow it to work more smoothly because of that curved leading edge, okay. Dimensional properties of the strike: about 1 1/4 inches by about 1 3/4 inches overall, but before the lip it's about 1 5/8 inches, okay. You're going to get a guide. This guide is, of course, you're going to see this in, you'll need a guide no matter what for your bolt, depending on whether it's a steel door or a wood door. It can be really installed either way, but you'll need to have a guide for that. If you have an inverted top or bottom channel of your steel door, you might be looking at this sort of installation. Otherwise, I think you might be looking at this sort of installation. Okay, that's your guide. A couple of screws will be included for the guide. If you've got a steel door manufactured at the factory for this hardware, you're not going to need that guide. They won't just leave a hole there for you to attach a guide to. Fastener package, you're going to get plenty of screws and a complementary finish. Those two plastic anchors, I'm thinking you might use those at the sill for your strike, is where you'd probably end up using those. Okay. Combination wood machine thread material. Now, there is some paperwork down below. There is paperwork that is included with this material. They have an 840 on one side and its sister products. It's set, and then so a pair of them, and then the 840 with the bottom fire bolt. If you're doing a application that will require a bottom fire bolt when you have a top latch, you can do that as well. The other side is going to be the semi-automatic, well, or what they call self-latching. The self-latching is an 805, and it has that latching bolt that I mentioned earlier with the pair, with the set, okay, and then the self-latching with the bottom fire bolt. So let's switch to the screen view where we can take a look at that supporting documentation. Okay, so we are looking at the hardware here, and extended description information, single automatic flush bolt, patented, non-handed free-floating cam. That's a reference to the trigger on the front. Minimal force to activate the bolt. It will certainly be a force below what the closer is closing at. Positive high temperature latch. This is going to obviously stay engaged during the entire fire test. Manufactured with override feature to prevent damage to the door or bolt. That's very typical to find in flush bolts because the strike area that the flush bolt is going to attempt to occupy, especially in the floor condition, is very often filled with particulate, dust, dirt, debris. Engineered to function in high frequency areas with minimal maintenance, as in no maintenance, other than keeping that bottom strike plane. Trim packages are available separately to reduce inventory levels. What they mean there is on the DCI 840, you can purchase this in a US 10 satin bronze, US 10B oil rub bronze, 26 for polished chrome, 2060 satin chrome, US 3 for polished brass, US 32 polished stainless, 32D satin stainless, US 4 satin brass. So you can buy these bolts and then buy the trim packages separately, and that will allow you to be able to meet lots of different requirements without having, 6 of each finish, which you never would. But, you'd be, if you kept a couple of trim packages and the unusual finishes, you'd be able to, meet requirements quickly. UL listed, ANSI BHMA certified, 3-hour listed and labeled for use up to an inactive door measuring 4x9 or 8x9. Positive pressure, that was the capital letter F. Those are the finishes. Template, let's dive into that. So this is the paperwork that is included with the box. Now this document is handy because you'll be able to review all of the dimensional properties of everything. I gave you the faceplate dimension, not the body dimension, but ultimately, it's 6 3/4 by 1. You're going to find that to be an incredibly common size. You'll see that they're asking for a mortise that's a 32nd heavier than the plate itself. I would have no compunctions about that whatsoever. Sometimes you want that hardware press fit tight. Other times, the bottom line is you observe what the template says. Unless your experience and your caliper in your hand on the hardware tells you otherwise. But officially following the installation instructions would be the obligation. Actually, technically, not following the installation instructions does violate the integrity of the fire rating of the opening. So be mindful of that. As an aside, to prove that point, the trick question is this: if a door closer on a fire door is missing its plastic cover, is the door still fire rated? The answer is no, it's not. Well, actually, the way I was taught, the answer is possibly. The answer is always first possibly. But the answer is actually, if the installation instructions tell you to install a plastic cover, then that door is not compliant with the fire rating requirement of the opening. So whatever you're told here is what's going to be looked at. Should something need to be, audited, reviewed, and looked at. The strike, the scar plate, the guide, I mentioned inverted top or bottom channel. That's what that would look like. Otherwise, you're running with this. That's what your prep looks like. Now, this is what's called a 12-inch bolt, 12-inch. And that's because the top of the door or the bottom of the door to the center of the faceplate, the center of the 6 3/4, is 12-inch. If you have an 8-foot door or a 9-foot door, is it permissible for you to use a longer rod that you've ordered from the factory? Absolutely. Again, you just cannot exceed that 9-foot height. But you would be able to the factory would be able to provide you with a longer rod, is the bottom line. Okay. Now, are you going to go about installing these, mortising the doors? Probably not. If this is a fire-rated door and they're not prepped, you probably won't unless you are licensed as a machiner of fire-rated doors. If you are, then the following won't apply to you very much. But if you were to prep a door, let's just say it's not fire-rated, all the data is actually here, even though it's not incredibly clear, but it's all here. So you obviously have to make a prep that's basically 1 inch by 6 3/4. They're telling you that it has to be 2 inch deep, your mortise. Now, when you look at the back of the assembly, yeah, it has to be 2 inch wide. It has to be 1 inch wide and 2 inch deep. So you need to make a pocket that is going to be 2 inch deep. The question is, how tall does that pocket have to be? And in fact, I am not seeing that here. The answer is going to be possibly on a follow-up document that we're going to look at. But that length of that 2 inch deep pocket needs to be underneath this area so as not to get too close to the screw all the way down, and then same concept over here. So realistically, about here to about here is what you're dealing with. And if I put my tape measure on this hardware, I would make that height somewhere right in the range of about 5 5/8 of an inch, or 5 9/16. That would give you a good preparation. But you don't know how far to start it from the bottom. That's the other issue that I'm seeing here. And I would probably start that at about a 1/2 of an inch from the bottom, and then run up my 5 9/16. Then you know that you've got a 3/4 inch back set. The question becomes is you need a hole from the top of the door all the way down to this area here. And the question is how large of a hole? Well, you'd have to really take the diameter or the size of the bolt, but really the size of the bolt, because it's a square bolt on its angle, and I'd say you're going to need about, well, you'd need every bit of a 3/8 hole down here. Up over here, it's going to have to be, it's a 1/2 inch square bolt, so if you're going to drill a round hole, you're going to be closer to about 3/4 inch. I wouldn't really want to over drill that hole, however. Okay, and then you've got the dimensions for the plate, 1 1/32 by 1 29/32, and then this 5/8 height. So they don't give us that dimension there on this document. Let's look at the next document where it may. So product information from 2009 and 2018. The catalog simply changed, but this template is the one that's in the box. So let's look at the old one first. I think the old one's better, actually, if I recall correctly. Yeah, that information's not here, and this we've all covered. Let's take a look at the 2018 version. Okay, so 840 single bolt. Yeah, again, they don't give us that information. looking at the data provided from the factory in the box, yeah, unfortunately, I don't see that size of that cavity to be done in the door. You know, there's not enough, if you've never done this before, there's not enough information to make you confident of how to proceed. But nonetheless, having machined countless doors, literally machined doors beyond count, it's very typical, of course, to proceed with looking at the template, making sure that you thoroughly understand that, doing a reality check on the hardware, and then deviating if at all necessary. What I mean to say by that is, you know, they obviously don't call out what size to make this prep. Okay, you're going to have to look at the hardware in this case, or you're going to have to call the factory and say, I need to know how long to make that mortise in the door. But when we deviate from a template, we do so because our experience tells us it'll be a better installation. And what I kind of mean by that is this material on the back of this flush bolt, here and here, in this case, it's 1 inch wide. So you need that 1 inch wide prep. But in other pieces of hardware, it's 7/8. So you don't need a prep that's quite 1 inch for that body of that bolt. And yes, I would go out of my way to make this body prep 7/8 wide and then do my face plate prep 1 inch wide. It's a better looking installation. I don't want to see any encroachment of the door material on the side of my hardware unless I have to mortise it in that way. But they're also making these templates and these installation instructions something that is not excessively complicated. You know, their client base isn't going to want to buy hardware that's, you know, that's very, you know, multiple step oriented to install. So that would be an example of why having the hardware sometimes is not a bad idea when you do the prep, although that is a luxury that we don't always have. So relying on the template is what we have to do. Let's finish up this video on camera, but before we do so, here's the link to the manufacturer's page here, and that link is going to allow you to see not only all of the DCI products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to their current product catalog. Older product catalogs are here as well. All right, let's wrap up this video on camera. In conclusion, DCI is an exceptional company when it comes to what they do. They have a relatively petite footprint of material in their catalog, but what they sell the daylights out of it. They do a great job. You pick that phone up, and almost always you don't have to get past the first person. Occasionally, if it's a technical support question on the availability of a circuit board for a power supply only, which is not in the catalog, that kind of call may be escalated to someone else. But exceptional folks over there, simple, straightforward, dependable, reliable, predictable, repeatable. So I use DCI every chance that I get. A lot of what they sell you can get from other people. However, they have their Panex series of exit devices, which is unique to them. But a lot of their line you can buy from other people. But in my opinion, I'm not buying this, you know, automatic flush bolt. I can buy it from anybody. You're buying this from them, but what you're really buying for is the value, the expertise, the prompt, reliable, predictable relationship that you have with them. That's really what you're purchasing, in my opinion, rather than just an automatic flush bolt. So keep in mind, DCI, they are a good crew to work with. Any questions on the 840 in a 605 finish, which, by the way, is going to look like that now that I have my fingerprints on it. Okay. And that's what I was referring to earlier. You're going to want to be somewhere from over here down to over here, and measuring that put me at about 5 9/16. Nice quality material. Any questions on the DCI 840 or any other DCI product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.